hackathons. I'm curious if you think there are lessons learned from starting with a motivated audience that you look at in terms of branching out into an even broader audience.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very true that a majority of the people who buy our products are data junkies. You know, they live and breathe stats and long-term trends, and I mean, they're obviously far more interested and involved in the process and longer-term goals. But yeah, absolutely, a lot of those methods that an athlete applies are what we need to try to teach the general layman what and how to use, and that you can't expect change overnight. And you have to be able to somehow educate and show and keep it interested, keep them interested, and keep it fun, so that they can stay on it long term and see that there really is going to be a change and you really are making a difference. But you're not going to see it overnight. You have to be watching those trends over longer periods of time.
And Ellen, as you're engaging these kids with these things, you know, do they run out of motivation? Are they willing to look for that long-term change?
Well, just in terms of kind of thinking through for ourselves, you know, kind of how to motivate and sustain engagement over time, which is really what we're trying to do. We went to the source. We actually, before we even knew where we were headed with this thing, we spent a lot of time with kids themselves, asking them very directly, the kids we were most interested in reaching, and those are the kids who are at risk for being sedentary, either because they're not as perhaps dialed in, if you will, to the sports world or the dance world or the organized activities that kids do, or they have environmental constraints in their lives that keep them from being out in the world in the same way as other kids. We were very interested in what kind of made them tick. And we didn't go say, okay, we want to make a product that's going to get you moving. What should it be, or what should it look like? We asked them nothing even close to that. We asked them basic questions like, you know, how do you spend your day? What's fun for you? What's the most fun thing you ever did, and why was that fun for you? What's the kind of thing you tend to spend your time on, and why? And we got a lot of insights from them. For example, just to make it more concrete, you know, kids telling us they like to be able to control something themselves. They don't want to have to rely on a grown-up. This is, again, this key age group, right, 11 to 14. They like choice. They like variety. They like to be able to customize. They like surprise. They like random bonus things. This is just insight that came. And all of that, then, we took back and said, okay, well, this is the product we need to make. One that's going to really create that experience that will be dynamic and ever-changing over time, that will sustain them because they've told us that it motivates them. So that's kind of the approach we take. We really do. We think of it as intentionally designed technology, starting first with the outcome that we're seeking, in this case, physical activity, and then backing up to the target kids, and then figuring out what to make, kind of in that order.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I want to turn the question back to Mike, and I'm going to pick on you as the big manufacturer representative. But when you look at something like that, like the idea of starting where people are and helping them make incremental steps, I can imagine that would sometimes be counter to this pressure we have to say we're going to follow evidence-based guidelines. And certainly in diabetes, there's, you know, keep the hemoglobin A1C under 7. Never mind that even dropping from 10 to 9 would be great. So is there any pushback or anything you see that would make it difficult to make these incremental leaps?
You know, my response would be no. I mean, the incremental leaps are going to be the most important. You don't go from 10 to under 7 in one fell swoop. It's not going to happen. And so the incremental steps that you have are the ones that you really need to be taking all the time, and then re-encouraging. And I know it's been said across the whole panel, through positive reinforcement and support. And where you find that support, whether it's in the cultural context, whether it's you as an individual, whether it's through surprises or the passion that you have for doing something and how you build it in. But we've got to be able to make those small steps. And that's how you get to the evidence-based facts and guidelines to say, hey, here's where it really makes a difference. And if you do this and sustain this, you can improve short-term outcomes that'll have a long-term impact on comorbidities going forward. It's not going to be one study at the end of the day that, you know, everybody's done that says, okay, here's the end-all and be-all answers. It's a lot of small incremental ones that lead us in the right direction that we start to put together to create the evidence to say, oh, here's what we should be doing. Or healthcare professionals can interpret to say, this is the best way to go, and here's how we're going to create guidelines like the ADA does.
Mm-hmm. I think that leads into the idea of scale, right? Scale, we've just talked a little bit about sort of scale on the individual level, starting where you are and making incremental changes. But we've also seen that a lot of these solutions are being piloted in small groups or just test things that are being put out into the market. And I want to, anyone is welcome to respond to this. When we look at the breadth of the problem within the country, we certainly need to bring these up to as large a scale as possible, right? And when we look at payers and wanting to reimburse, how do we do that? What are the barriers to doing it? What do you guys see as the path to go from where we are today to really broad-scale adoption? And feel free to jump in, or I'll pick on Miguel.
Okay, sure. It's a huge challenge, and we haven't found a solution yet. I think the fundamental component that each of those solutions somehow have are the data capture and the feedback. If we can abstract away from that and create then a market around consumer products that can be driven by data and provide this feedback then within their products, whether it is around exercising, whether it's around emotional things, whatever it is, whatever somebody likes, whatever somebody feels comfortable with, then we don't have to struggle creating this pipeline of interesting products that has to come in order to keep people engaged, because fun things unfortunately get old very quickly. And people lose interest, and kids grow up and are suddenly interested in something else, and it still has to work. And so if we somehow can find a way to have a middleware that allows for all this data capturing of all those vital signs that might be important for people, create the appropriate feedback, maybe even a standardization around that, which would be nice. And then other really more consumer-based products tying into these types of middlewares, that might be a good approach for that.
Are you saying, without saying it, something like a Google Health or a Microsoft Health Vault, or are you envisioning something really different?
It could be along those lines, but I'm not really talking here about necessarily clinical health, right? This is about lifestyle and well-being, and yes, something like a Google platform. I mean, there are all kinds of candidates out there, and time will show what will be kind of the winner. But yeah, the candidates are there.
I think it goes also towards increased cooperation and partnerships. I mean, the cost is astronomical, and so is the risk. And more and more you're seeing in the pharmaceutical industry, people can't afford to go it alone. They have to share those costs and risks, and we have to work closer with partners who are payers to understand, what values and benefits they're looking for, and how can we help achieve that. We have to understand, even with our competitors, there's one pool of money that we have to invest in diabetes. We can either spend it saying, my meter's better than your meter, okay, which isn't going to help any of our patients or our healthcare professionals, or we can invest it in things like this ACT trial that show you can make a real difference if you set up the right testing for people, give them the right information, they can get their A1Cs in control, and they can do something differently. You can change behaviors. And I think if we can focus in that direction and really reach out to have more partnerships with each other across the board, we'll be able to attack some of those scale issues going forward.
So Ron, I want to open that up to you, because you are part of an alliance that is getting ultimately potentially competitive players to work together. How do you make that happen? What are some of the limits of that? Where do companies say, okay, I'll share as far as this, but not that?
Actually, it's an interesting question, because quite often we get people coming into the alliance or talking about joining the alliance, and they're, well, I don't know if I want to join. I have somebody who's a direct competitor to me who's in the alliance, and don't know if I want my device to interoperate with theirs. It's an initial reaction, but after people have joined, they see the value of creating a larger pool for everyone. And having devices that can interoperate seamlessly gives the consumer choice, and that's what the consumer is waiting for. The consumer is tired of getting tied into one specific company's products and just completely being pigeonholed. Now with an alliance like what we have, a consumer is free to choose a device